If you have $1 million saved for retirement, can you safely spend $40,000 every year without running out of money? For years, the famous 4% rule said you could. But after inflation, market volatility, and longer life expectancy, many people are asking the same question. Does the 4% rule still work? The answer is yes, but not in the way most people think.
Quiet wealth, calm finance, better life.
One of the most interesting things about money is how much we want certainty from it. We want to know how much we need, how much we should save, how much we can spend, and perhaps most importantly, whether our money will last. That desire becomes even stronger in retirement, because retirement is different from every stage that comes before it. For decades, most people focus on earning. Paycheck arrives, bills are paid, savings slowly grow. Life follows a familiar rhythm. Then one day, the paycheck stops, and suddenly a new question appears. How much of my savings can I safely use? At first, that question sounds simple, but the more you think about it, the more complicated it becomes. Because retirement may last 20 years or 30 years, sometimes even longer. No one knows exactly how long they will live. No one knows how markets will perform. No one knows what inflation will look like 10 years from now. Yet despite all of that uncertainty, retirees still need a plan.
And that's why rules become popular. A rule offers something comforting, a place to start, a framework, a sense that maybe this complicated challenge can be simplified. Few retirement rules have become more famous than the 4% rule. For years, it has been quoted in books, financial articles, retirement seminars, and online discussions. Some people treat it almost like a law. Others reject it completely. But what often gets lost is the fact that the 4% rule was never meant to predict the future. It was designed to help people think about retirement spending in a practical way. And that's exactly what we'll explore today. Not whether the rule is perfect, but what it can teach us about planning, flexibility, and confidence. Because retirement is not about finding perfect answers. It's about making thoughtful decisions in an uncertain world. What is the 4% rule? Let's begin with the simplest explanation possible. The 4% rule suggests that a retiree can withdraw approximately 4% of their investment portfolio during the first year of retirement. After that, withdrawals are adjusted for inflation. That's the entire concept. Simple. Let's look at a few examples. Imagine you retire with $500,000. 4% would be $20,000 per year. If you retire with $1 million, 4% would be $40,000 per year. If you retire with $2 million, 4% would be $80,000 per year. The purpose of the rule is not to tell you exactly how much to spend. Instead, it provides an estimate of what your portfolio may be able to support over a long retirement.
Think of it like a starting point, not a destination. A map rather than a guarantee. And that's where many misunderstandings begin. Because people hear the phrase 4% rule and assume it must be precise. But retirement planning isn't precise. It's dynamic. Life changes, markets change, expenses change. The rule simply provides a framework for thinking about withdrawals, a way to answer one of retirement's most important questions. How much income can my savings realistically provide? Why the rule was created? To understand why the 4% rule exists, we need to understand the question researchers were trying to answer. Imagine retiring at 65. You have savings, you have investments, But you don't know how much you can spend. Spend too little, and you may unnecessarily limit your lifestyle. Spend too much, and you may risk running out of money later. This challenge has existed for generations. For decades, retirees wanted a practical answer. So researchers began studying historical market data. They looked at different periods in history: booms, recessions, high inflation, low inflation, strong markets, weak markets. And they asked a simple question. If someone retired during these different periods, how much could they have withdrawn without exhausting their portfolio? After examining many decades of data, a pattern emerged. A withdrawal rate around 4% appeared surprisingly durable. Again, not perfect, not guaranteed, but durable. And that's why the rule became famous. Not because it promised certainty, but because it offered a reasonable starting point based on history. The retirement fear behind the rule. At its core, the 4% rule isn't really about percentages. It's about fear. Specifically, the fear of running out of money. Many people assume financial anxiety disappears once someone reaches retirement. In reality, it often changes form. During working years, people worry about earning enough. After retirement, they worry about spending too much. The paycheck disappears. The future feels less predictable. And every financial decision can feel more significant. This fear affects people at every wealth level. Someone with $500,000 may feel it. Someone with $1 million may feel it. Someone with $2 million may feel it. Because fear is rarely about the exact number. It's about uncertainty. The 4% rule became popular because it offered reassurance, not certainty. Reassurance. It gave retirees a framework that felt more reliable than guessing. And sometimes that's exactly what people need. Not a perfect prediction, just enough confidence to move forward. Meet John, a retiree with $1 million. Let's imagine a retiree named John. John is 65 years old. He recently retired with $1 million invested. For most of his life, John focused on saving. Now, for the first time, he must focus on spending. And surprisingly, that feels harder. Every withdrawal feels uncomfortable. Every expense feels larger. Every market decline feels personal. One day, John discovers the 4% rule. Suddenly, he has a reference point: $40,000 per year. Not a promise, not a guarantee, but a starting framework. The rule doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it helps John make decisions. Instead of asking, "Can I afford anything?" he begins asking, "Does this fit within my plan?" That shift changes everything. Because retirement confidence often comes from structure, not certainty. Why inflation changes everything. Now, let's talk about the challenge that quietly affects every retirement plan: inflation. Imagine you retire today. Your expenses feel manageable. Everything seems under control. Then 10 years pass. Groceries cost more. Insurance costs more. Healthcare costs more. Travel costs more. Nearly everything becomes more expensive. That's inflation. And inflation changes the retirement equation dramatically. Because retirement isn't just about preserving money, it's about preserving purchasing power. The question isn't, how much money do I have? The question is, what can that money buy? This is why retirement planning is more complicated than simple arithmetic, because the future rarely costs the same as the present. And that's why successful retirees focus not only on today's expenses, but on how those expenses may evolve over time.
The biggest misunderstanding about the 4% rule is the belief that it guarantees success. Many people hear about the rule and assume it provides certainty, almost like a promise. Withdraw 4%, follow the formula, everything will be fine. But that's not what the rule was ever designed to do. The 4% rule is a guideline, not a guarantee, and understanding that distinction is incredibly important. Because retirement doesn't happen inside a spreadsheet. It happens in the real world. A world where markets move unexpectedly, where inflation changes, where health changes, where family circumstances change, and where life rarely follows a perfect plan. Imagine two retirees. Both start with the same amount of money. Both withdraw the same percentage. Yet one experiences higher healthcare costs. The other receives unexpected financial support from family. One decides to travel extensively. The other prefers a quiet lifestyle at home. The rule may be the same, but life is different. That's why retirement planning can never be reduced to a single number. The number matters, but the person matters more.
The rule provides a framework. You provide the judgment. And perhaps that's the most important thing to remember. The 4% rule is not meant to replace thinking. It's meant to support it. Successful retirees don't blindly follow rules. They use rules as tools. They adapt, they adjust, they remain flexible. Because flexibility often matters more than precision. And that lesson extends far beyond retirement planning.
The sequence of returns problem. Let's explore one of the most important ideas in retirement planning. An idea that sounds technical, but is actually very easy to understand. Imagine two retirees. We'll call them David and Michael. Both retire at 65. Both have $1 million invested. Both withdraw $40,000 per year. And over the next 20 years, both portfolios earn exactly the same average return. At first glance, their outcomes should be identical, but they aren't. Here's why. David experiences strong market growth during the first 5 years of retirement. His investments grow early. His portfolio gains momentum. Michael experiences the opposite. During his first 5 years, markets decline significantly. His investments fall in value while withdrawals continue. Years later, markets recover. Eventually, both retirees achieve the same average return. Yet David finishes retirement with substantially more money. Why? Because timing matters, not just returns. The order of returns matters. When losses occur early in retirement, they can be especially damaging because money is leaving the portfolio at the same time. Expenses continue, bills continue, withdrawals continue. The portfolio has less time and less capital available to recover. This concept is often called sequence of returns risk. But don't worry about the terminology. The important lesson is simple. Retirement is not only about average returns, it's about the journey those returns take. And that's one reason retirement planning involves humility. Because no one can control the sequence. No one knows exactly what markets will do next year, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. This reality doesn't mean retirees should panic. Quite the opposite. It means successful retirement planning often focuses on resilience rather than prediction. Because predicting the future is difficult. Preparing for uncertainty is much more practical.
Why some experts prefer 3%. At this point, you may be wondering why some financial experts recommend withdrawing less than 4%. Why do some suggest 3% or 3.5%? The answer isn't necessarily that they believe the 4% rule is wrong. Many simply prefer a larger margin of safety.
Imagine planning a road trip. One driver prefers arriving with a nearly empty gas tank. Another prefers keeping half a tank available at all times. Neither approach is automatically right. They're simply different. Retirement spending works much the same way.
A lower withdrawal rate may increase the probability that assets last longer. It may provide additional flexibility if markets perform poorly. It may help some retirees sleep better at night.
But there is another side to that equation. Every dollar not spent today is a dollar reserved for tomorrow. And while protecting the future is important, so is living in the present. This is why retirement planning is rarely about finding the perfect percentage. It's about balancing competing priorities: security and freedom, caution and enjoyment, future needs and present opportunities. The right answer depends on the individual. And perhaps that's why retirement remains more art than science.
The retirees who never spend enough.
One of the most surprising retirement challenges has nothing to do with overspending. It's underspending.
Many retirees spend years worrying about running out of money. And for good reason. It's a legitimate concern. But sometimes that concern becomes so powerful that it prevents people from enjoying the resources they've spent decades building. Let's imagine a woman named Margaret. Margaret retired with more savings than she expected. Her home was paid off. Her expenses were modest. Her investments performed reasonably well. Objectively, she was financially secure. Yet Margaret constantly worried about money.
She postponed vacations, delayed home improvements, avoided experiences she genuinely wanted, not because she couldn't afford them, but because she feared future uncertainty. Years passed. Her savings continued growing. Her portfolio remained healthy. And yet her behaviour never changed. She continued living as though financial disaster were always around the corner. Eventually, a friend asked her a question. What exactly are you saving the money for? Margaret didn't have an answer, and that moment forced her to reflect. Because retirement isn't only about preserving wealth, it's also about using wealth. Not recklessly, not carelessly, but intentionally. Money is a tool, and tools exist to be used. Many retirees discover that the hardest transition isn't learning how to save, it's learning how to spend without guilt. Learning how to trust the plan they've spent decades building. Learning how to enjoy financial security rather than constantly fearing its loss. This doesn't mean spending everything. It simply means recognizing that a successful retirement is not measured only by the size of a portfolio. It's measured by the quality of life that portfolio helps support. What the 4% rule really teaches. After all this discussion, we arrive at an interesting conclusion. The most valuable lesson of the 4% rule may have very little to do with 4%, because the rule is really teaching something much deeper. Planning, balance, flexibility, confidence. The rule reminds us that retirement requires a strategy, not because strategies eliminate uncertainty, but because they help us navigate uncertainty. The rule reminds us that spending and saving are not opposites. They are partners. One supports today, the other protects tomorrow.
The rule reminds us that flexibility matters because life changes, markets change, needs change, and successful retirees adapt alongside those changes. Perhaps most importantly, the rule reminds us that confidence matters. Not blind confidence, not overconfidence, thoughtful confidence. The kind of confidence that comes from having a plan, reviewing that plan regularly and adjusting when circumstances require it. Retirement planning is not about predicting every future outcome.
It's about becoming prepared enough to handle a wide range of outcomes, and that's a much more realistic goal.
When people first hear about the 4% rule, they often focus on the number. 4%. A percentage. A calculation. A formula. But over time, many discover that the number is not the most important part. The most important part is the conversation it begins. A conversation about how much is enough. A conversation about fear. A conversation about confidence. A conversation about the future. Because retirement is not a math problem waiting to be solved. It's a chapter of life waiting to be lived. A chapter that includes uncertainty, but also opportunity. A chapter that requires planning, but also flexibility. A chapter that benefits from caution, but also from joy.
The future will never be perfectly predictable. No rule can change that. No strategy can eliminate every risk. No portfolio can guarantee every outcome. But thoughtful planning can help us move forward with greater confidence. And confidence matters. Because the goal of retirement is not simply preserving money. The goal is preserving freedom. The freedom to make choices, the freedom to spend time intentionally, the freedom to focus on the people and experiences that matter most. And perhaps that's the true lesson behind the 4% rule.
Not that 4% is magical, not that one number can solve every problem, but that thoughtful planning creates options, and options create freedom.
Thank you for spending this time with me. And if this channel helps you think more calmly about money and retirement, I hope you'll join me again. Quiet wealth is built slowly and lived fully.
Quiet wealth. Calm finance. Better life.